Oh, hey there! Looks like you guys are here for some Changing Diva set reviews, and today we're going to be discussing the LRigs in Changing Diva. Madoka is our first one card that we're going to review today. We're going to go in depth into the LRigs themselves. Um, is Madoka a good card? We're going to use our normal review scale of staple, playable, barely playable, and non-playable. And if we're going to do that with Madoka, I think the answer is going to be a spoiler here. A very, very, very probably staple card. It's probably better than playable. It's a well put together card. It has direction in it on automatically and tells you exactly what it wants to do. Madoka's a level 3 Elrig with the grow cost of 2 blue per use. It's a team diagram, and its team ability is auto once a turn. When your opponent discards a card by your effect, draw a card or enter charge 1. Its enter ability is draw 3 cards and discard 2 cards, and its action for once a game is you can return target 1 level diagram Elrig on your field to the Elrig deck, and then you can replay those cards. So, what makes this so good? Well, it has the normal flexibility that Musica has, right? It has the same sort of effect, which says return target level 1 diagram Elrig, which means that this card is not good when you decide to make a dream team and you're going to use other cards on it. You could, in an effect, do that, but you're 50%ing what you can bounce back to replay by only having one diagram Elrig. If you break teams and you don't have that once a game action ability, you're left with something without even the auto ability. You just have an enter ability that's a good enter ability, mind you, but not good enough to do a dream team off of. So if you're playing Madoka, you are playing her on a diagram team, period. That's the only view lens that we're going to look at her with. And when we look at the colors that she's in, that would be green, blue, and black. There are a lot of discard options. Now, green and blue has some self-discard options, and that is actually relevant when talking to Madoka. Yes, it does not trigger her ability at all, but there's a lot of cards that benefit from your seeing yourself discard cards. You will get to them in the actual review of the Signy, of the blue Signies, but realistically, having the ability to have self-discard is pretty good, and you'll see that that's actually part of the enter ability here, is draw 3 cards, discard 2. A lot of the times that discard 2 is just as important as the draw 3. Now, it does give you a replacement card for itself by allowing you to basically draw an extra card when it enters. Digging 3 cards deep for an answer, or for a way to secure the game-winning victory, is really good, and being able to discard out 2 cards that you don't need, or 2 cards that you would rather have in the graveyard, since you are playing black and blue, again, which are graveyard matters, and green to an extent, our discard pile matters decks and colors, is a good enter ability. So I must stress that this is a very good enter ability. As far as what action you're going to be pulling your back to your hand, again, normally it's going to be Lancer, but there is removal that you could pull back to your hand with diagrams level 2 Musica. There's also draw and it's not even really draw, it's recovery in Musica as well. So in a lot of ways, this is just like Musica's center, where your 2 options are really, for its once a game abilities, to draw or get Lancer. This is also draw or get Lancer. In blue, I do think drawing more cards is probably better because you are dirtling a little bit more. And this is definitely slightly slower than Musica, although not as slow as Uchu. So you've got a winner on your flexibility for your once a game action. You also, now we need to get to the actual meat and potatoes of it, your team ability. The auto, once a turn, when your opponent discards a card by your effect, you can either draw a card or enter charge 1. There are several cards that are great with this. Again, you're playing green, so some green stuff, Ozaka Getsun, for example, wants to see that you're enter charging every turn. And the fact that you are basically can make them discard, Enercharge, and then be able to do one of these things extra, or even just the ability that you're paying for your discard effects by doing the Enercharge, means that it's basically free to play your resource grinding effects, which is absurd, right? Between this and Dark Engine, you get paid to remove your opponent's creatures, and you get paid to remove your opponent's Signy. You get paid to remove your opponent's cards in hand. This is a great thing. You do want to be proactive in this game, and a control deck that is being paid off to control the opponent's resources or grind the opponent's resources out is a great effect. Now, you also have the draw there. You don't necessarily need the draw all the time in Wixoss. It's much less powerful effect than other card games, but the fact that you can then go, all right, well, I'm losing this game, or I need to get to victory as soon as possible to secure my win. You can start using the draw instead, especially if the opponent doesn't really have cards that in hand and aren't really playing anything anymore. Then suddenly the draw becomes more effective. So as such, when you look at Madoka Total, the ending review here is that it is a staple. However, it's a staple in the fact that it can only be played in diagram decks. I wouldn't dream teams. Moving on to the next one, we've got my favorite, since I love my Uchu teams. We've got Bang ready to fight. Except I just realized that it's not ready to fight. It's red to fight. I think it's supposed to be ready to fight. Dude, the English localization is not great a lot of the times. Anyways, we got Bang, and I assume ready to fight. Its grow cost is 2 green. It is a Team Uchu no Hajimari. Its team ability is when it enters, your opponent chooses a signal on their field and then puts it into the owner's enter zone. And then its auto ability is at the beginning of your attack step. If there are 5 or more cards underneath this LRig, enter charge 1. If there are 7 or more cards underneath this LRig, then target level 3 green Signy gains Lancer until end of turn. Its action ability is once a game, you can put all cards that are underneath this LRig on the field under this LRig. So it does the same thing that Tamago does. It basically eats all of the things below your assist LRigs. And if you've assisted grown at least to 1 on both sides, you're going to enter charge at the beginning of your attack. If you've assist grown onto 2 on both sides, then this will give Lancer as well to target 3 level green Signy. Now, that's going to push you in a direction. We just talk about the once a game action ability. It's going to push you, just like in Tamago, to a direction where you want to be growing your assist LRigs pretty rapidly. And you can do that in Uchi no Hajimari. As well as there are other dream teams that you can make with this that have a cheaper grow costs and more proactive grow costs, so you want to be doing them more often. And you'll be able to Kirby up your team pretty quickly. So it's a realistic thing to do, but it's something that you need to do in building, is understand whether or not you're going to want to be rushing that, or whether or not you have to wait till turn 4. In my opinion, with this card, the way that it's built, because you want to be enercharging and gaining your resources earlier in the game rather than later in the game, and you want Lancer pretty soon in the mid-game, because Lancer's the best as a mid-game ability, you'll want to do it as soon as possible. Your auto ability is very, 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 very strong. The fact that you are enercharging every turn means that you can start putting some stuff in your deck that is more expensive, or reliably be like constantly triggering enter the battlefield effects that your Signy might have. And green has a fair amount of those things, as well as blue does, and honestly white as well. I guess all colors do is what I'm trying to say. And then being able to give a green Signy Lancer is probably the most restricting sentence in this card. The fact that it only hits green level 3 Signy means that you need to make a deck where your top end is pretty much nothing but green level 3 Signy, which is not terrible, but green is not known as a strong color on its own, at least currently in the meta. It's an okay thing. The plus end is, again, we keep talking about this one green Signy. It's very good. If you want to play green, you should pick it up. Osaka Getsoon, which wants you to have seen that you've enter charged this turn in order to start doling out removal constantly. This enables it immediately, and from the LRig zone, which is even better, especially at the time that could happen. There's going to be more and more green Signy that come out that want to see you enter charge before they do an attack trigger, and this will reliably trigger that all the time. Meaning that, unlike Tamago, where you kind of felt bad when you weren't Kirbying up all your stuff immediately on turn 3, this actually could Kirby up even if you don't, even if you're not giving things Lancer. I would like to get things Lancer, but the enter charge on the beginning of attack phase, and again, beginning of attack phase, so it can't be messed up with really easily, and it will allow you to do attack trigger enter stuff. That this is very good in that fact. Now we should talk about its enter ability. Its team enter ability is actually quite weak, which I don't mind. It does mean that you can break this team and you can do a dream team with Bang instead, because you're not really giving up much by not doing its enter ability. The fact that you're allowing your opponent to choose what lane they want to be open is kind of awkward. They're going to choose their weakest thing at all points in times. Now that's not bad, it's still a free open lane to attack down, and since you're growing it on your grow phase, they're not purposely putting it in a lane that could mess you up, as you can still put Signy down in that open lane that might need the attack or the hit trigger or something. So, is it good? And the answer is, I don't think I would run Bang ready to fight on Uchu no Hajimari. I would be willing to give that ability up, so that way I don't have access to Nova. Nova is not very good in this deck from my testing. Nova's level 1. The best one wants you to draw blue and white cards, which the green that this deck requires means that you're going to be missing all the time with it. You can run Nova Mute, but Nova Mute is very, very bad in terms of, at least it's like, it gets better later down the line where stopping an attack trigger is pretty good, but you're blowing up your own resources to do so, which green wants to be establishing resources early. I just think you're better off choosing a different color to go with other than Nova specifically. As far as this Bang ready to fight, playable, where does it land on the scale? I would say it's playable right now, and as we go into set 3, set 4, it becomes barely playable. It's still playable, even the Japanese meta today, but not by a ton. So I would rate this as just playable. You can play it for now if you want a good excuse to play green, but I don't think you'd be playing it super hard in the future. And this brings us to DJ Lovett, third verse. That is a level 3 red LRig. Grow cost is 2. Team card jockey action. If your opponent's LRig is level 3 or more, you may put target card from the enter zone into their trash. And to be clear here, it's any card, so it doesn't have to share a color. Its enter ability is vanish target Signy on your opponent's field. Non-conditional, you can just choose one to vanish it. And once a game is, this LRig gains action down and up to level 2 LRig. You can up this LRig until end of turn. So if you have 2 assists, you can up it twice. Before I move on with talking about this one, I want to mention that this video is actually a re-upload because I was told correctly so by the Wixoss community that this can attack 3 times. For some reason, I had my Magic the Gathering brain on and was like, yeah, it's an action. You can do that whenever. And you can't in Wixoss. You can only do actions on main phase unless they have the attack phase timing. As such, I'm going to, if you listen to my last video, lower this by a significant margin. The fact that it can't attack 3 times, so basically can't endless punchline once, endless punchline a second time with that team, means that you're inevitably only using this to enter burn. Now, that's not terrible. It is basically go to the top, right? Which is a good card for aggro decks, and it's in red, which means it's in the aggro color as well. So you're looking at a more aggressive version of Card Jockey, much into the vein that Card Jockey currently is in the 0102 meta, that can also do Endless Punchline, do all that junk, as MC Lion being white will generally start becoming more about walling and using Endless Punchline as a win condition. So it has a niche in the fact that if you want to be a more aggressive version of Card Jockey, sort of a combo finishing aggressive deck, then DJ Lovett can still perform under just the pure basis of your primary color is red. You have this enter burn to stop assist grows on your turn that hopefully is your victory turn, probably your endless punchline turn. And you also have a really good enter ability and just unconditional vanishing. However, this being said, Lovett will still sort of fall victim to the fact that it is an aggressive mid-range strategy, so it's neither aggressive or mid-range. It's somewhere in between, which gives it a weird niche. But in that niche, like, it doesn't have the broad spectrum use that No Limit or DJ Lion is going to have. And as such, you will find that you're sort of beaten at the punch on either side. So this is going to become less good as time goes on. But it's still okay. I would put this down as barely playable, in my opinion. It does all of the things that you want an aggressive mid-range deck to do. Just the realistic fact is aggressive mid-range decks are not necessarily the best way to go about card deck building. Also, you're going to note that its action could be a liability. The fact that you can enter burn with a pretty good enter burn 3, mind you, is a lot. But you also need to compete against the fact that they could Xenocluster you, and Xenocluster is so ambiguous that there's a very good chance that you will get Xenoclustered if you try to enter burn. And then inevitably, you'll end up enter burning 2, which is still pretty good, but you are opening yourself up for potentially... You need to know if your opponent is going to be running Xenocluster or not. And that's what I think. So yeah, I'm going to say DJ Lovett, barely playable. Build it aggressive if you decide to go for it. Its future progresses in the meta, it actually kind of gets just power crept out on both sides of those spectrums. Like I said, the aggressive spectrum or the mid-range spectrum. So I'd call this one barely playable. However, it will do a good job if you run it and you optimize it to be an aggressive no limit or aggressive card jockey deck. Last but not least, we have Akino Bound for Valor. That's a white level 3 LRig. It's team no limit. Team constant is during your opponent's turn. The Signy in your center LRig zone. Your Signy in the center Signy zone gets plus 2,000. Your enter ability is draw a card and enter charge 1. Its action abilities: once a game, you can down 2 up to level 2 LRigs. You may discard a card with guard. If you do, you may return up to 2 target Signies on your opponent's field to their owner's hand. Its grow cost is 2 white. Is this card any good? And I think the answer is quite like the card that came before it, DJ Lovett. Akino suffers from being a more mid-range version of No Limit, and No Limit would rather be an aggressive mid-range, would rather either be full-on more tempo control with Ray in the future, or more on aggro with Harina. The issue is, once you line this up to Harina, Harina's almost better in every sense of the word of the card. It just does almost everything better for what your deck wants to do. And it's also red, which means that you don't need to do this weird hybrid color. Since white is a good color on its own, but it's more of a less aggressive color and more of a mid-range color, it ends up being sort of strange. When you build Akino, in my Gauntlet testing so far that I've done, Akino can be built in the same manner of No Limit's aggression on Harina, and basically it just does the same job as Harina, with the only difference being it is about a half a turn slower in terms of tempo, and its ability is more powerful than Harina's, but less easy to pull off. So it's a more high risk, high reward. So if you're looking for a more aggressive aggro that has a higher ceiling for winning, then Akino can do that, right? Akino can get in there and deal the final bits of damage more so than Harina can, but she does it less reliably. If you build her to what she wants to be, which is a little bit more of an aggressive mid-range, on my turn, my center LRig is a strong wall, right? I'm using things like Cassiopeia that are, I want to actually live to my turn, and by doing that, growing its power will inevitably let me do that. I'm running things like Arcwane, which will wall my opponent out with Shadow. Then inevitably you'll find that Akino can be built more optimally that way and have a different identity than Harina. But the support for that is just not quite as strong. In my opinion, Akino pretty much is an okay card, but lives in its teammate's shadow the whole way through, right? The fact that its constant ability, its team constant ability, is something that affects your opponent's turn and doesn't really punish them, it just makes it harder to deal with stuff on your side, is a bad ability. You'd rather have stuff that affects your cards or things that punish your opponent's cards, not stuff that affects your cards defensively. That's just not what you want to be doing in Wixoss. It's not a defensive game like that. Its enter ability, drawing a card and enter charge 1, just like Harina, is good, but again, it's the same thing as Harina. Its action ability is incredibly strong, but you need to recognize that there is actually a downside to having to have both 2 LRigs that are level 2 on your assists and discarding a guard. So if it was one of those instead of both of those, this card might be worth thinking about. The fact that it is conditional, and the fact that you need to say, not only is this got to be a turn 3, turn 4, probably more like turn 4, because I want to speed do my decks, or speed grow my assist LRigs, and that pushes me towards an aggressive rather than a mid-range strategy again. I also need to either hold a guard or use Hanel to find a guard for me to use this ability, or do some kind of guard recursion. It's just more asks for you to pull this ability off, whereas Harina literally just says, damage the opponent. So, Akino, in my opinion, I'm going to be harsh here, is not playable. I just wouldn't play it, personally. Now, if you wanted to make an aggressive deck, because I think there's more support and aggression right now in our current meta, an aggressive version of Harina that uses more white, you could pull it off, but I would argue that you should be just using Harina this whole time, and if you wanted to lean more in that mid-range strategy, you probably should do MC, Lion, and do Card Jockey. So, this gets the grading of unplayable for me. And with that, that's the end of our review for the LRigs, the center LRigs that are going to be coming out in Glowing Diva Set 02. What do you guys think? What are you most excited to run? Personally, I think I'm going to see a lot of Madokas on the other side of the battlefield, but I do think I'll see a lot of Akinos on the other side of the battlefield for a while until people realize it's a bad card and it starts falling off. As always, I always hope that you flip Life Burst. I'll see you in the next review, guys.